Hello and welcome. He's declared an independent nation on a large chunk of US soil and says it's the right of his Lakota people. From Hollywood to a real-life armed siege, he's persistently fought for better awareness of Native American Indian rights. This week on 101, meet straight-talking activist, actor, and modern-day warrior, Russell Means. The Los Angeles Times has called him the most famous American Indian since Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, and few can boast such a colorful life. An actor, politician, musician, and activist, Russell Means has been locked up in prison, shot at, organized riots and occupations, mixed with celebrities, and taken on the U.S. government. Born in South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1939, Means was the eldest son of an Oglala Sioux Indian. Soon after World War II, his family moved to San Francisco in California, where he attended the mainstream school system, but from an early age, Means was making his mark. He became an early pioneer and first national director of the American Indian movement, and though he later clashed with members of the group, he spent years organizing occupations of historic locations. Most famously, in 1973, a 71-day takeover of Wounded Knee, a small village on the site of a historic Indian massacre in 1890. His bold actions made him a celebrity, attracting attention of the actor Marlon Brando and artist Andy Warhol, who created an iconic portrait of Russell Means in 1976. His profile grew further when he started acting in 1992, playing roles such as a Native American Indian chief in the Hollywood blockbuster The Last of the Mohicans. In 1997, he published his controversial autobiography, Where White Men Fear to Tread, trying to explain some of his radical activism, something he still advocates to this day. Russell, great to talk with you.
Thank you very much for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Now, listen, I've got to ask you, I know you abhor the term Native American. You're quoted saying, I really abhor that term, that it's a government term used to describe all the indigenous prisoners of the United States. Now, explain why you feel that way and what term you prefer.
Well, actually, coincidentally, I was in Washington, D.C. in 1970, the very day they decided to call all the indigenous peoples they hold prisoner, the original Hawaiians, American Samoans, the Micronesians, the indigenous people of Alaska, and all of the American Indians as Native Americans. When in reality, anyone born in the Americas is a Native American. Duh. But of course, that's the United States. So consequently, I prefer American Indian because I know the origin. American comes from a Spanish word, America.
But I thought that term India, sort of Indian, was a misnomer because the colonizers thought they were arriving in the Indies.
Good point. I'm glad you brought it up because in 1492, the subcontinent, what is now called India, was then referred to as Hindustan. And there is no India. That's a bastardization of two Spanish words, en Dio. Then they morphed it into Indian. And Dio means in with God. I prefer to be in with God than to be a Native American.
How hard has it been to hold on to your American Indian culture, tradition, and heritage in what is a sort of increasingly fast modern world?
It's almost impossible. The federal government does not allow us to teach our language. We have to teach their policies, their schooling. We have self-administration, not self-determination. Of course, our health is the worst in the world. The life expectancy of Lakota men and Indian men in general throughout the nation is below 50 years for all American Indian people. So consequently, the colonization of the American Indian, apartheid was taken from the American Indian policies of the federal government. The concentration camps of Hitler, and he wrote about it in the 1920s, that America has the right idea of confining the unwanted races in a specific place. And that's how he started his concentration camps.
Now, I know you were one of the founding, or at least early leaders of the American Indian movement. You joined back in 1968. But you fell out with them, I know, over a number of political issues and so on. But how does that work in terms of your relationship now in trying to represent American Indian people when you fall out with certain groups and so on, or there's not enough unity between them?
Well, there's an axiom among revolutionaries, and make no mistake, I am a revolutionary. I believe in one revolution, returning back to who you are. One revolution. So therefore I am one revolution. So consequently, I've never felt the need to count bodies or statistics, and you can only move as fast as the people want to move.
Let me take you back through your early years, so we can have an idea of where you've come from and sort of where things have developed. Let's look at those early years. You were born in 1939 on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. What do you remember of those early childhood years?
My grandfather, all my grandmothers, my aunties. We come from a matriarchal system, which is a balanced society. It's not where women take over. Patriarchs fear the woman taking over, but it's not that way. It's a balanced society. But anyway, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was my male role model, and he didn't have any fingers on one hand. But he told me many stories, and he took me around. It was in the days where we traveled by horse and wagon, every place. It was free. The only requirement I and my brother had in the family was to be home at supper time, to be on time for supper. That was an inviolate rule. Other than that was freedom, and that's where I really learned how to be free. You're free to be responsible, because I was charged with the responsibility of my younger brother. And that basic groundwork of being free has been the theme of my entire life.
Your father was Oglalasu, is that how I'd say it?
Yes.
And your father Hank, what sort of influence did he have on you? What sort of things did he teach you? I know you were saying your grandfather was a strong role model, but what input did your father have?
Unfortunately, my father wasn't much of a father. And he did teach me one thing, because he had two things that were enormous: patience, of which I'm short of, and he had humor, a very wise type of humor. Every time he said something funny, you learned from it. So he taught to me at least, he taught me through his humor.
What about your mother, Theodora, I think it was, her characteristics? What sort of...
Very strong matriarchal woman who had control of the home. And she had 4 boys, no daughters. Even though in our matriarchal system, her sister's kids are our brothers and sisters. But in the immediate family, just 4 boys. And she made sure we were boys. She took us camping. She had us engage in male things, And she really taught me freedom. And she did, even though she was a strict disciplinarian, she taught me freedom. And she taught me respect for my people.
Now, I know soon after World War II started, actually in 1942, your family moved to California, and you went into the more mainstream schooling system, and life was more mainstream American in that sense. How did you adjust from life on the reservation first and then into the mainstream American life?
Well, again, fortunately, we were in a housing project, and that was during World War II, or after World War II, partially during World War II. But it was all races, and we were put in the neighborhood with the blacks. It was a very segregated society then. They didn't know where to put the Indians, so they put us in with blacks. And we're the only American Indian family. At any rate, we had a lot of visitors, though, because of the war and the soldiers and sailors going back and forth. And so I grew up in a very mixed neighborhood: Filipinos, Mexicans, Chinese, whites, blacks, and the lone 2 Indians, me and my brother. So you learn to live with all the sacred colors of the human race. You just do as a kid. You have to, It's just the norm. And there are no gangs, fortunately for us. And it was, I had a beautiful boyhood.
How are you as a father? You have a son who's in his 20s, Tatanka, I think is the name. And, in the same way you said your grandfather was a strong role model, but your father wasn't. How have you made sure that you play the right role for him and keep him in line with the traditions and culture?
All my children At the time, for my older children, we had an AIM school, so they went to the AIM school. And I tried through my work with the American Indian movement to be a role model, not only for them, but for Indian people. At any rate, with my youngest, I had more time with my two younger. And so I was constantly getting them involved in the spiritual aspect of being Lakota and taking them out every morning for the morning prayer when there's only the morning star in the sky. See, in our area of the country, when the morning star is in the sky alone, all the night people have gone to bed, the crickets, the toads, the frogs, and the day people haven't woke up yet, the birds or anything, and that's a time of prayer for us. You know, the world, the universe is waiting for you, for your prayers. And that's when it is the men's charged responsibility to begin the dawn of a new day by not repeating the mistakes of yesterday, and to get one with the universe and yourself, and you give a thank you prayer. So it puts you in a positive frame of mind. Then you can start.
Russell, there's lots more questions for you. You've got a very colourful life. We'll talk more about it in a moment. We're back with more one-on-one in just a moment.